Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to join us for our webinar. Today, we're talking about tackling hours of service with help from BigRoad. My name is Leisha Bedard, and I'm the head of marketing here at BigRoad, and I'll be your moderator for the webinar today. Joining me is Matt Tonkin. Matt is BigRoad's marketing manager and hours of service expert. During today's webinar, Matt will guide you through everything you need to know to ensure you remain compliant and up to date with changing rules and regulations. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to type them into the question box on your screen. We also received a number of questions via email. At the end of the webinar, we'll open up the floor for a live Q&A. Now I'll turn things over to Matt to get started.
Thanks, Alicia, and hi everyone. And as Alicia said, today's really just about going over sort of some of the ways to be sure that you're doing all that you can to ensure compliance. A lot of this is sort of focused on sort of the changes that have been coming up recently in the industry, things like the ELD mandate, which is of course the hot button issue for everyone, but other things such as I'm sure some of you have probably been seeing in the news, debate on the 34-hour restart and what that should look like, if they should again institute the 2 in a row 1 to 5 a.m. periods or not, and sort of discussions that are going on about that. So we really just wanted to take the time to sort of go over a lot of the stuff that's sort of affecting the industry. So to start off, just wanted to talk a bit about the types of things that are affecting fleets in particular and what they sort of have to be aware of at all times. There's a really hours of service gets so complicated by just the variations that can be out there. You have things like jurisdiction variations if you're an interstate versus an intrastate driver. If certain states have separate laws, don't follow the FMCSA rules versus states that for their intrastate do follow the FMCSA rules. So if you're operating in multiple areas, going through, even crossing the border, say from the United States into Canada, keeping track of all these varying rules as you're going throughout your week, it can pose a lot of problems. Now, the same thing sort of happens to a lesser degree with passenger versus property carriers. For the most part, if you're either one or the other, so you don't get that going back and forth between the two. But it can be a cause of concern because particularly for passenger carriers, I know that a lot of the rules out there tend to focus on property first and foremost, and then passenger tends to be the secondary thing. So sometimes passenger carriers can get a bit confused because they're hearing these rules that are specifically for property carriers and getting a bit more confused. Shift reset rules, I mentioned earlier that there's been some debate for the 34-hour reset and what that is going to look like going forward. So we're still waiting to hear for sure. It's been sort of the 2 overnight minimums have been suspended for now, but there's always a possibility of that coming forward. You have break exemptions, and of course the big one is ELDs that everyone's worried about. So there's a lot of variation that can cause trouble here, and that's sort of what we want to tackle today. Now, what do these mean for you? If you're a fleet, pretty much this means that you're constantly going to have to be providing training when new regulations come up, new rules get put in place, and then a few months later they may no longer be put in place. You might think there's something coming up, and then there's lawsuits and things like that that may delay them. So it's always important for fleets to be on their feet when keeping up to date with what the FMCSA is publishing, what their particular operating jurisdiction is publishing, just to make sure that they're constantly up to date on what regulations they're looking at. Now, another thing this means is that to remain compliant, fleets really are starting to have to be on top of their drivers and making sure that they're always getting all the logs in they need, having that archive, and really examining their logs on a fairly regular basis to be sure that their drivers are in compliance, because a driver might be making one mistake and not actually realizing that. And if you don't have sort of that backstop of someone who's in a safety role there to take a look at the driver's logs from time to time and say, hey, did you know you're not doing this properly? That's really something that can cause a pretty big issue down the line if, say, you get audited and it turns out there's been multiple infractions that you never knew about. Of course, this sort of takes away from the time that employees within the fleet could be putting towards something better, like making the fleet run more efficiently, getting better loads and things like that, when instead they're focusing on what safety and compliance they have to put out there. So that's sort of a big thing. Now, the same thing sort of applies to drivers. Every time there's a new rule set put in place, or they have to move, say they're regularly an intrastate driver in somewhere such as Texas that has their own set of rules, and they suddenly move to being an interstate driver, having to follow the FMCSA guidelines, that really can play with your routine. You're used to doing your hours of service one way, and then when you move over, it gets quite difficult. So switching between rule sets that's sort of a big problem for drivers, and it gets pretty complicated when you're trying to calculate your hours. You run into things, certain drivers trying to do things, split sleeper berth rules, which are complicated for anyone. So that really is what makes these problems, trying to get through all of these issues. So what we want to talk about is how you can actually stay ahead when you're dealing with these things. So the most important thing for fleets to know is what rules you're running at. Now, that's important to know, especially for larger fleets. If you have multiple drivers who are doing sort of different rules every day, you really need to keep on top of who is doing what rules, making sure that they're following the rules exactly. So that really almost becomes a full-time job, is just making sure you know who is following under what regulations, if they have any exemptions, let's say, or things like that. Becomes an important topic. Next thing is to really evaluate your compliance needs. So what I mean by this is that you want to look at how much you need to put into your compliance needs to make the best return on value for your company. If you're a small fleet, you may want to leave the compliance issue up to each individual driver. But once you start getting up there, that really gets a bit more complex, because if one driver is not doing what they're supposed to be doing, that can really cause a lot of issues for your fleet. So if that is the case, you're going to want to work with your drivers pretty completely, make sure they know exactly what rules they're following, know how to complete their logs, and all these issues that can come up on a day-to-day basis, that they're able to follow these through. For drivers, the exact same thing applies. Knowing what regulations are affecting you, what on each particular day you should be following, and knowing that you've done your logs correctly. The next thing is, don't stretch yourself thin. And by this, I mean, try not to put yourself in a situation where you are going to be tempted to cheat on your logs. Now, that's sort of the hot button issue with the ELD mandate, is the fact that logs won't be editable. And of course, by that, we know that everyone means they won't be able to cheat on their logs. So the real issue is, try not to put yourself in a position where you're going to have to cheat. It may be appealing, you're getting more miles in, but in the long run, if you're getting put out of service, that's less so. And with the ELD mandate coming, you're going to want to make sure you're getting into a habit of planning out your day properly, so that you're always getting in the amount of hours you can and not going over. And of course, hand in hand with that is not letting dispatchers push you around. A big issue in the past with the idea of the ELD mandate has been that drivers are being coerced to do more hours than they're legally able to. So with the ELD mandate actually included in that has been legislation to help limit the amount of push drivers are getting from dispatchers to go over their hours. So keep in mind, there is now that legislative backing to help you out if you do find yourself in that situation. I know that can be difficult when you take into account you feel like your job may be at risk. We're always hearing about the driver shortage. Whether or not you believe that's true, the thing is that all companies are looking for qualified and good drivers. So by really standing out as that safe driver who's able to do everything, you actually have a lot of leverage in that situation. So how are some of the ways we can maintain compliance with all this complexity? Well, first let's look at some of the options that are out there today. I think the basic one is paper. Everyone usually knows that. And the pros of paper are that it's editable, so you do have that flexibility if you make a mistake, or if for some reason you want to add a few 15 minutes here or there. That is available for you, and they're familiar, so everyone knows how to do a paper logbook. The cons of this are that they're messy and they're error prone. It's very easy to make a miscalculation, and that can result in a violation, which puts you either out of service or results in a fine. Again, they're also very time consuming, so while you may be able to move that line a little bit easier with paper, it does actually take a lot of time going through doing the calculations and all the paperwork, so it actually eats up a fair bit of your time. The next that's on the market right now is the electronic logbook, and this is what BigRoad has right now as their standalone application. So what electronic logbooks are is they're a non-engine connected logbook, and that's a very important distinction to remember when we get into talking about ELDs. Electronic logbooks are basically just a paper log created digitally. So pros about this is they create very nice, neat logs. You're never going to have the officer struggling to read what is on there. They also give warnings to the drivers about when they need to take breaks, when they're going over their hours, something that they may not know. They save time because they're very simple to make. You just hit a quick push of the button and you can put yourself on duty. It'll use GPS to select where you are and fill in the rest of the log from there. And electronic logbooks are actually editable as well. Just like paper, you can go in and edit your time when you're on duty. Say you forgot to switch out of driving, you can go in and actually switch that. Now, the big issue with electronic logbooks that are non-engine connected is that the legislation allows the officers to ask for a printed copy of your logs. So this means that you're going to have a printer in the cab so that you can produce your logs there. Now, with the ELD mandate coming out, this is really going to little, and that's because ELDs, which are engine connected logs, so an ELD or an AOBRD, is really similar to an electronic logbook. The main difference being that the information is actually coming from the engine and going into the device that's recording the logs. So the difference there is that officers then do not have the option to ask you for a printed copy. They have to accept the device to read the logs. So that's one of the bonuses there. Now, the main con of this, and that everyone's worried about, is that the editing is limited. So drivers will have the ability to do some editing in terms of when they went on duty, if they accidentally didn't click in, their off-duty time. They will be able to edit that. Driving time, however, is actually going to be coming from the engine bus, and the device will read it straight from the engine. So that won't be editable, and that's what's really getting drivers concerned about running out of their hours of service. Now, of course, there will be ability, if there's a malfunction, for drivers to, after the fact, go in and edit them. However, the original is going to be preserved. So at that situation, they would have their edited version of the log, which shows what they believe to be the true hours they served, and then there would be the I guess you could call it a carbon copy of the log, which shows the original amount of driven hours as read from the device. Likely, if it's an actual malfunction, this is what you'll show to the investigator and say, yes, there's a malfunction, and that's probably going to be okay. Where it gets interesting is if an officer starts noticing 5, 6, 7 days out of the month, you've been running and saying that, editing your logs and saying, oh yeah, there was an issue. Well, they're probably going to either put you out of service or say, why are you running with a broken device? So that's something to keep in mind there. So of course I have to touch a little on about what we can do to help you out there. So start out just knowing the laws. A big thing that we can do to help is the fact that BigRoad's already programmed with all the legal rule sets put in place for quite a number of different variations for if you are exempt, say, from the 30-minute rule, 30-minute break rule, things like that. BigRoad has all these in, and you can check what rules apply to you, and then that's pretty much it. You just go ahead and you start your day, and the log will automatically keep track of how many hours you have left. You don't have to put any thought into it. You know that you're going to have a compliant log right there without doing any of the math. You just follow what it says, and that's it. For fleets, a big important thing is to review the logs. So an advantage there with BigRoad, instead of having thousands of driver logs coming into you every month, let's say, in physical paper that you have to sort through, BigRoad is a completely online storage with a full archive of all your driver's logs, basically extending back as far as you want. You can limit that. You could have only 6 months, which is what is required by law. Well, 6 months plus the current month, sorry. So you can easily go back, and safety managers can go through. They can pull all the logs for a single driver, for multiple drivers, and if ever there's an audit, they have that paper trail with them, and it's simple to find. And if you start noticing a trend with a particular driver, you're going to be able to notice that and sort of head it off before something big happens, and that's going to really improve how you function. Another big thing is trip planning, and this gets particularly important with the ELD mandate, as a lot of companies are getting worried about, well, their drivers won't have enough time. If they're 10, 15 minutes away from where they need to be, what's going to happen? So what having BigRoad as a fleet management system really lets you do is sort of look at all your drivers together as a whole, where they are, how much they have left in their cycle time, and where you can send them. So this really lets you sort of plan out who's going to take what load easier. You can see who can make it where, and you can really plan out so that your drivers aren't running into that situation where, well, if I go another 2 or 3 hours, I'll be able to make this load. So you're really not putting them in the position where they're going to feel compelled to drive over their hours and possibly get put out of service and result in a fine for you. Another thing is that BigRoad is future-proof. So if you start with BigRoad today, you'll be able to sort of get to the point where in 2 years, when everyone's on ELD mandate, you're still going to have the most current software and hardware that we're going to send out to you, so that you never really have to worry about reinvesting to make sure that you're up to date. You will always have the most current solution. And just fixing your bottom line. A lot of people look at it like a lot of money is being spent, but you have to remember if it's an investment. With BigRoad, rather than putting a ton of time and man hours into looking at your safety compliance and making sure you have the best logs out there, we really take care of all of that for you. So you really limit the amount of expenditure put into looking at your logs. So in the end, it's going to save you money by using an electronic system. So from here on out, we want to focus a bit more on the ELD mandate, since it's really the big change that's coming through, and it's what's going to be the most important thing for everyone in the next couple of years. So there's a couple things that the ELD mandate really does. The first being that it mandates the use of ELDs. So within 2 years, basically almost every CMV driver is going to have to use an ELD in their system to finish their record of duty status logs. What it also does is it mandates that drive time has to come directly from the vehicle. It's not just an electronic version of a paper log. It actually is using the information coming from the vehicle to record this. And the legislation also finally defines what an ELD is. So what is an ELD? So we find a lot of people are having troubles just understanding at all what an ELD is. There are misconceptions about what they're going to need. Some people are asking us if they can just continue using just the standalone BigRoad app. So I thought we'd go over a bit about what the different acronyms all stand for. So the first one we have here is eLogs, or an electronic logbook, and this is what I talked about earlier. It's a standalone application that doesn't connect to the engine. So really, it's a lot like paper logs, just in a digital form. This is what the BigRoad app by itself is. Now, the three sections to the right here are EOBR, AOBRD, and ELD. And to some degree or another, these are all engine-connected logging systems. The two that you're probably most familiar with are EOBR and AOBRD. These have been the standards that have been associated with engine-connected logs for the last 20 years or so, with AOBRD being the commonmost. And currently our DashLink system that we're using is an AOBRD, and that's the criteria that was defined up until December of 2015 when the ELD mandate was published. We are currently in the process of getting out our ELD version of DashLink, which will be coming shortly. So you can see pretty much AOBRD and ELD are very similar in the small checkbox we have here. Some of the big differences being that GPS is no longer optional, and ELDs will actually require what's called persistent GPS, which means that the device itself, as opposed to just using GPS from the cell phone or the tablet, is going to have to be part of it. And there's a few other rules, such as who can do the editing. A big issue previously with electronic logs, excuse me. A big issue previously with electronic logs was that a lot of the editing power was actually given to the supervisor, and this goes hand in hand with the idea that this goes hand in hand with the idea that there was the coercion of drivers. If the driver isn't the person who has full access to their apps or to their logs, it's a lot easier for a supervisor to go in there, edit the log, so it looks like they have more driving time and say, oh no, you have drive time, go do this. So what ELDs really do is put that, the onus for the final signed off logs back on the driver to make sure that they're the ones in control of how many hours they've done. So here's the ELD timeline, and this lays out when drivers and fleets are going to have to be compliant. So as I said, in December 16th of 2015 was the publication date for the ELD mandate. So that really sort of started the stopwatch on this. After that, we have a 2-year window to which we're going to call the enforcement date. So basically at this point, any driver who doesn't fall within an exemption, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, any driver come December of 2017 is going to have to be on an engine-connected system. Now, for the most people, that's going to be ELDs, but there is also what's called the 4-year window for AOBRD compliance. So as I said, AOBRDs were the previous iteration of engine-connected logs. BigRoad's DashLink is currently an AOBRD. So for those who get on the AOBRD system before the enforcement date, you'll actually, because you're investing in an engine system, the government doesn't want to chastise you for getting in early instead before the enforcement date, so you'll actually be allowed to use that system for 2 years beforehand. With BigRoad, when you get on, you'll either be, depending when you sign up with us, you'll have the option to use an AOBRD or ELD system. Come December 2017, we will update you at whatever timing is convenient for you to our ELD system, and that's free of cost too. Is just part of your subscription with BigRoad. All right, so let's talk a little bit about who is going to have to comply with BigRoad. Or sorry, no, who is going to have to comply with the ELD mandate, I should say. So we've got a bit of a rule of thumb that we go by here, and it's definitely not completely exhaustive on how it goes, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb, and that is if you're currently required to maintain logs for your record of duty status, you will most likely be required to use an ELD. So that pretty much sums it up. So if you or your drivers have to keep logs today, you're probably going to have to do it. So there are a few exemptions to that. And here are sort of the most common questions we get about whether or not someone's going to need to use an ELD. Sort of far and beyond the most common is from single owner operators, and it's, do I need to comply if I'm just one truck, or if my fleet's only 2 to 3 drivers, do we really need to comply? And yes, you are going to need an ELD. There are no exemptions out there that are based on fleet size. So the next most common one is about running local trips, maybe with an occasional longer trip in there. So in this situation, there are actually exemptions for local area drivers. They fall under more or less the same rule set as the current short haul exemptions. Depending on the situation, it could be 100 air mile radius or 150 air mile radius in some situations, and the same sort of situation there with in terms of how many hours you have in the day to complete your day, returning to your home terminal. Now, for drivers who are almost exclusively short haul, but then do maybe occasionally in a month do a long haul, there is still an exemption there for when they're out on the road. And we like to call it the 8 and 30 rule. So basically what it says is that as long as the driver does not drive a long haul operation more than 8 days in any rolling 30-day period, and the rolling 30 days is an important note. It's not a monthly total. It's actually a constantly rolling set of 30 days. So basically any given day, the 30 days previous, if as long as you haven't gone over 8 days doing long haul, you'd be allowed to drive without using a ELD. You'll still have to use a logbook, paper logbook in those situations to do the required logs, but you wouldn't need an ELD. Now, if you get into a situation where you're going over that, say you're driving 9 or 10 days out of any given 30, you will actually need an ELD for the days you're out there. So that's an important thing to note. It may mean that if you're in that sort of couple day window and you don't want to be running an ELD, you may have to rethink how you're getting out on the road and try to shorten up the amount of days that you're out there. Or you can just move to an ELD system as well. They do work with short haul, even if you are exempt. BigRoad does allow drivers to use the short haul exemption when doing that, and it'll keep track of their hours for them. So there is that option as well. So the next big issue is if you're driving an old truck, particularly ones that don't have an ECM port, are you going to need to comply with the ELD mandate? So for the most part, no. What the rules say is that if you're driving a truck that was manufactured prior to the year 2000, so that's 99 and older, then you qualify to be exempt from the ELD mandate. One important thing of note, it does seem that the rule is based around the manufacture date of the truck itself and not, for example, the engine. So that's an important thing to keep in mind if you're using a newer chassis with an older engine. That may cause some complication, especially if the engine, for example, doesn't have an electronic connection, but the truck is newer than the year 2000. You may run into some problems of being required to use an ELD, but having difficulty actually connecting it to the engine. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind over the next couple of years, and just keeping that in mind. The next big question is operating as a drive-away tow-away operation. And drive-away tow-away operations actually don't require an ELD under the new mandate. So that's a good thing for them if they are not looking to have an ELD. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that even though the main reasoning behind this is that they don't want a driveway or tow-away operation that is never going to see the truck again, having to install an ELD and then take it out constantly. You don't run into that issue with BigRoad. We're very much a plug-and-play system, so you plug the DashLink system into the diagnostic port of the truck and your phone or tablet will automatically connect and you go from there. So it really is a great option for companies that want to have a digital archive of their logs to keep using an ELD system, because it's not going to be that difficult and there are so many great bonuses to having it. So we've been talking a lot about hours of services and the changing of hours of services, and ELDs really do sort of go hand in hand with that. But the truth of the matter is that specifically on hours of service rules alone, ELDs really don't have any big effect in terms of the rules of the hours of service aren't changing. Which sounds funny when you hear the complaints of I'll have fewer hours to drive in. Technically speaking, no, you won't. Whether or not you've been driving under the legal hours beforehand sort of plays a part of that. So really the hours of service themselves aren't affected, it's how you're doing the logs that are going to be affected. So that's the big thing here, is that drivers are going to have to learn a new process on their logs. Companies are going to have to figure out new processes on handling their logs. But overall, the hours of service, at least in relation to the ELD mandate, there may be other changes coming up that we don't know about. Again, discussion on resets, things like that. But the hours of service themselves aren't changing from the ELD mandate. What about cheating? Well, as we said, yeah, there's going to be less flexibility here. So if you're a driver, that's how you've been getting by, you may be running into some issues from now on. So we really recommend, a lot of them are saying, well, I'm going to hold out to the last minute, get as many hours in as I can. The issue with that comes when in December 2017, suddenly you realize that you aren't able to do what you were doing beforehand, and the other drivers are actually getting a leg up on you because they've gotten used to the system beforehand. So that's something to keep in mind. Again, the anti-coercion rule is a big part of that too. Trying to keep drivers from being compelled to go ahead and go over their hours has been a big part of this. So what are the next steps moving forward? So the first thing, of course, is researching and evaluating, and that's what you're doing here by being with us today. You're going to want to look into what's going to suit the needs of your business. What are your options, particularly when it comes to ELDs? You want to make sure you know everything. What different programs are going to work well with how your company operates? So that's something to look into. Once you figure that out, you're going to want to create a transition plan. For the most part, we find that once drivers actually start using an ELD, they really end up liking it. It makes their day a lot simpler. So what you're going to want to do is, I would suggest getting the drivers that you know are probably going to be best at getting into an electronic environment, and really starting with them first. Maybe start with a non-engine connection, which really is very similar to a paper log, just digital. And then from there, you can sort of move into getting, if you're coming with BigRoad, a DashLink system that you can plug in and go from there. Break this into chunks. If you're a larger fleet, try to get certain drivers on at a time, and then have those drivers help out other drivers if possible. This way you can do this, you can get drivers on board before the ELD mandate sort of says it has to. If there's any issues, you have that buffer of time in which you can do it. So that's all part of the execution process. Making sure that you have a staged rollout so that you can deal with those problems before they become a big issue. So if you're interested and want to start with BigRoad, there's a few ways you can get started with us. If you're already using BigRoad and you're a customer, you can call us and we'll be happy to send you a dash link if you want to start your transition to an ELD system right away. If you already have a dash link system, you're actually in a great place, because you have that additional 2 years to December 2019 in which you can just continue using that system. Everything will be fine. We'll continue to send you updates as we have them, and you really don't have to worry about too much. If you're completely new to electronic logs, one thing I would suggest is trying our non-engine connected system first. This is going to, whether you're a driver or a fleet manager, be a good way to introduce you to the way that ELDs are going to change how you operate, as sort of that transition piece from paper to an electronic system. If you're a driver, you can download the app from the Google Play Store or the Apple iStore. Just go and search for BigRoad, and then what you can do is you can go to bigroad.com/getstart, and you can actually start a 30-day trial of our fleet management piece to get an idea there. So we're going to move on to some of the questions. I've seen a ton of them pouring in here, so hopefully we can get through to all of them. But yeah, Alicia.
Yeah, for sure. So our first question, is California going to adopt the rule in the near future?
Right, and this has sort of been something that's been up in the air with states having the ability to create their own intrastate rules. We're not exactly sure what they'll all do. Most states do follow the FMCSA guidelines, so in those situations, the ELD would seem to apply as well, but it's really going to be up to every state to decide. So just, again, make sure that whatever jurisdiction you're in, try to follow those rules that have been published by that state.
If a driver delivers more than one delivery in the same town or city, can they log as on duty not driving and log it as local delivery?
So I guess this depends a bit on the situation, but the way it's worded, I would imagine it means if they've been driving from, if they're driving over the 100 air mile radius and then do a delivery, pick something up, and then within the same city deliver again. In that situation, no, you can't log as though it's a local delivery, just because your total day is actually going outside of those 100-mile air radius. So you do have to continue to maintain as an interstate driver, I guess you say, or a over-the-road driver.
How does all of this apply to school buses?
Yeah, so to be honest, I'm not very knowledgeable on school bus regulations in general, but I do believe for the most part they fall under passenger carrier regulations. So in that case, in the case of ELDs, those do apply to passenger carriers as well. So it's something to keep in mind that you are going to also have that. Now, I'd imagine for most school buses, though, you would fall within the 100 air mile radius. So if you're operating under those short haul exemptions, then you would continue to do so.
Does BigRoad support the Alberta Provincial hours of service?
Yeah, so we do have hours of service available for Alberta and all of Canada as well as many exemptions based in Canada. There's a north of 60 exemption, I believe, and a few others, so we do have those options available.
Okay, 2 of my owner-operators have trucks older than year 2000, and 2 owner-operators have trucks newer than year 2000. Am I able to get ELDs for the newer trucks and not the older ones and still stay compliant, or does the entire fleet have to run an ELD?
Right, yeah, so when thinking about the exemptions for ELDs, it's really at a per driver or truck level. So in this situation where you have 2 older trucks and 2 newer trucks, you would be able to only outfit the newer trucks with the ELDs and still allow those drivers using the older systems to run on paper logs. So keep that in mind. It's really at a truck level, and that goes for other things too, such as drive-away, tow-away operations. If you have some drivers who are doing drive-away or tow-away, but others who are just doing regular freight hauling, the drive-away, tow-away would be able to operate using only paper logs, but the other trucks, even if your company is usually drive-away, tow-away, if they're not operating in that fashion, then they're going to have to be using ELDs, so that's an important thing to keep in mind.
Do drivers have the ability to move back and forth from non-CDL short haul exemption to full-blown logging and have all the necessary logging done within the program?
Yeah, so within BigRoad, we do have the option. It's in our rule sets to choose for the short haul exemptions, be they non-CDL or CDL, and then you can switch back to full-blown logging. It's just a matter of switching between the rule sets within the application.
Okay, how will the ELD mandate affect drive-away, tow-away?
Yeah, so we mentioned this earlier. Again, there is an exemption for drive-away and tow-away operations, provided that you are actually operating as drive-away, tow-away for each route. If you switch from that, then you don't keep that regulation, even if for the most part you operate that way.
Okay. Are ELDs mandatory for our 550 international trucks that we use about 8 times a year to haul the drill rig to the site and back?
So this is actually kind of a two questions here. Let's just say for the specific truck, I'm not 100% familiar. It would depend on the age of the truck, what year that truck was in. But if you're talking about that you only use 8 times a year to haul rigs to and from the drill site, in that case, you would fall under that exemption I mentioned about only driving eight days out of any 8 days out of any rolling 30. So 8 times a year, it definitely sounds like you're gonna be low enough that you can continue to just use paper logs for those particular trips.
Where do I buy BigRoad?
Yes, so if you're interested, you can reach out to our sales team at sales@bigroad.com, or the phone number here, 1-888-305-8777, extension 2, and they will set you up. If you're not interested in committing that quickly right away, then going to bigroad.com/get started is also a great option. That would get you the trial, and you can go from there.
Okay, I have 5 drivers that have CDL and 5 that do not. Most of our trucks are older than 2000. So I have to equip the newer 2000-year vehicles, but continue to do logs for every driver in every other commercial truck, regardless of ELD or not?
Okay, so we've got a fairly specific situation here. So let me try to wrap my head around this one again. So 5 CDL drivers and 5 that are not. So you talk about having trucks that are older than 2000. Yes, those ones will be exempt, and the newer ones will require the ELDs. So really it comes down to how those commercial drivers or non-commercial drivers are operating. If it's a situation where you're currently required to do logbooks, as I would imagine most of the CDL drivers are, then you're going to have to continue to do the logbooks. If it's a do the logbooks using an ELD. In the 2000 or newer trucks, and the old ones, you would be able to use paper. If it's a situation where you're not currently required to use paper logbooks, then you'd probably fall under an exemption there as well.
If you have ELD equipment, can it be used with BigRoad?
Okay, so BigRoad, we actually have our own in-house equipment that gets used in tandem with the application on your cell phone or tablet. So we would, when you sign up with BigRoad, send that out to you, and that's sort of on a month-to-month basis, where if something happens, the equipment malfunctions, or you need an updated version, we would just send that out to you. You send us the old one, and it comes back. So if you currently have a non-ELD, or sorry, a non-BigRoad engine connection system, that actually won't work with BigRoad. It's not part of our system.
Great. Are printers required in trucks?
So that depends on your situation. If you're using an electronic logbook, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the non-engine connection version, then usually you're going to want a printer. That's because officers do have the option to ask you for one. Now, we're finding more and more that isn't happening anymore. For the most part, most officers are familiar enough with electronic logs that they will accept them right on the screen. Of course, there are some exemptions. Missouri in particular is particularly strict with being sure that they ask for printed logs. Again, with the ELD mandate in place, this kind of becomes redundant when almost every driver is going to have an engine-connected logbook anyway. It almost seems pointless for this practice to continue on, because in a year and a half it won't happen anymore anyway. So currently, if you're just using a non-engine connected electronic logbook, yes, keep a printer in the truck just in case. But if you're moving to the engine connected system, our DashLink, for example, you won't need that printer.
If all of your trips will be under 100 miles, will an ELD still be required?
So yes, one thing to you'd fit the exemption is what I meant with the 100 miles. One thing to specify too, so having a trip of 100 miles versus a 100-mile air radius is a bit of a different thing. A trip of 100 miles, of course, would fall within that air radius anyway, but that's just one thing to specify, that it's not the road, the amount of miles driven where you qualify for the short haul. It's actually the air mile radius, so outside of the area from your home terminal. So in that situation, you would be exempt, though.
Are all states participating in the ELD mandate?
So this goes back to what we said earlier about states do have some ability to legislate on the jurisdiction, but for the most part, especially if you're driving interstate, yes, they will all be participating in the ELD mandate, and most of them do follow federal regulations anyway. But there are some exemptions to that, but that will really have to sort of be waiting to see how the states respond to this.
What's the difference between the BigRoad Mobile App and the DashLink system?
Right. So once again, this sort of takes us back to that chart I mentioned earlier with all the variations. The BigRoad Mobile App is a non-engine connected system that can be used with our DashLink system to link the engine of the vehicle to the BigRoad Mobile App. Basically what that is it's the difference between an electronic logbook and an ELD. So when you're thinking ELD, again, always think engine connection. It's not just a program on a smartphone. It's that engine connection.
Will drivers still be able to make their own corrections?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, drivers will be able to make their own corrections, but there will always be sort of a carbon copy, and during the day, those corrections are going to be limited to the on-duty and off-duty and sleeper time, and the drive time is going to come from the engine. So keep that in mind. They won't be able to change anything within the drive time itself.
Why does BigRoad show a warning for on-duty not driving after 14 hours?
Yeah, so I can see that being confusing because some people would, technically, if you're still working after 14 hours of on-duty service, you're not necessarily in any violation until you get behind the wheel of the truck and start driving. So what BigRoad's showing you a warning there for is just basically to say, hey, you've been on duty for more than 14 hours. If you start driving, you're going to be in violation. So at that point, you're not in violation just because you're on duty, but you're not going to be able to drive again until you've gone off duty for at least 10 hours. Why we really put that there is basically because just in case you went on duty and you forgot to put yourself in off duty when you did, it's really just there as a reminder, basically to say, hey, are you actually off duty or are you still working?
Has BigRoad been certified by the FMCSA?
Right, so I'm going to, this question refers to ELDs in particular. So one important thing to note is how the FMCSA is actually doing the ELD certification is kind of strange, even honestly, to the providers like us, in that it's a self-certification system. Basically what that means is we, as manufacturers of the ELDs, are going to do our own tests and say, yes, we fit all the ELD requirements, and we're going to then add ourselves to the list of the FMCSA approved ELD systems. If you look on there now, you'll probably notice that we're not on there. And you'll actually probably notice that a lot of the large competitors out there are not on there as well. The few that are on there are actually very new to it for the most part. The reason we aren't on there yet is because we're doing our due diligence to make sure that we fit with every single aspect of the ELD mandate. It is a long published mandate, about 500 pages. So we've been making sure that we've read that thing from front to back to make sure that our system complies with everything that we have on it. We still have our AOBRD system, which is fully compliant with it's the legislation 395.15, I believe, which mandates AOBRDs prior to the ELD mandate. So basically, the reason we're not on there yet is because we want to make sure we have everything exactly down pat, and then we're going to put ourselves on there when we know that our system is perfect. Until then, we have our AOBRD system, and it'll be a simple matter of switching to the ELD system once that comes out.
How many different transponders are available?
So I'm going to, how I understand this, I believe, is just different types of connectors. So there's actually only one DashLink transponder, I guess you could call it, the basically the box that reads the information from the truck. And then we have several different connectors. I'm not sure the exact number. I think we might have 4 or 5 now. So those are basically connectors that just plug into the various ports for the trucks. You have 9-pin, 6-pin ports, OBD2. So those just sort of, those are the different ones we have here.
Is the ELD mandate just for the US, or does it affect Canada as well?
That's a good question. So right now, it's a US. Only in the US. It's a US legal mandate. Now, to say that doesn't affect Canada at all would be not a good thing to say, since so much trade goes across the borders. So it's important to know for Canadian drivers, if you are driving into the US, as soon as you get into the United States, you're going to have an ELD. Just like now, currently, the rules are different, and this is what we touched on earlier with there being so much complication between the various rule sets. Right now, Canada has slightly longer driving hours, so if you were to be driving in Canada and going across, know you're going to the US, you're going to have to make sure that the days previous that you're actually within the US limits rather than Canadian limits. So it's something you have to plan ahead. Similarly, going forward, you're going to want to make sure that you have an ELD if you're going to be doing a lot of trips into the United States, because it's going to be mandatory. Now, as for if you only drive within Canada, there has been talk about the Canadian government putting out an ELD mandate as well. So far, we haven't actually seen any actual legislation, but what we're expecting is that once the ELD mandate is in effect for the United States, maybe a little bit of time to see how it's going, the Canadian government will likely issue its own mandate.
Okay, I start my day with a complete reset. I go from off-duty straight to sleeper. Do I have to stay in sleeper for the full 10 hours, or can I start my drive time an hour early?
So even though I'm assuming you're saying you've taken a full reset and then done a full day, say 14 hours on duty with the 11 hours driving in there somewhere, and then you went directly to sleeper. So you don't have to spend the full 10 hours in the sleeper, but you do have to have that full 10 hours either sleeper or off duty in some way. There are some exemptions, some changes to that with things such as the split sleeper rule, which again just complicates things. But from how that question read, I'm going to say you can't start your drive an hour early. You do need to have that full 10 hours off, or it's not going to consider you having your shift reset. Okay. One here, Alicia, you probably can't quite read this one. It's on my screen, and it's a long one. But the question is basically around the BigRoad system. So it is the current BigRoad system compliant to the ELD standards that go into effect in December of 2017? And basically it asks if you purchase now, and it's not, will you get free updates and everything. So yeah, I kind of mentioned this before. The system that we have right now is technically an AOBRD. So what it means is that is the sort of second line on our timeline, the December 2019. So if you have an AOBRD system, you can use it until December 2019. Now, we're going to have our ELD system ready way before then. In fact, we're looking to have it ready within the next few months and get that ready to go. So we are going to have the full ELD system available by December of 2017. So it's really not something you need to worry about. We would, again, just ship you the new ELD system as soon as you want it at no cost to you. We just ship you the new version, and you ship us back the old version, and that's how we'd go from there. Okay, so one question here is, and it gives a kind of a specific example, but what happens when you go to your Home Depot and someone else takes the truck out, I believe. So I think basically the question is, how is the ELD going to affect when drivers switch between trucks? I guess we could use that as a more generic question. So I can't speak for all ELD systems, but for the BigRoad system, how it works is you log in and out of your ELD system, the BigRoad system, and then connect to the truck. So when that truck's being driven, the ELD is logging the hours, but you're signed in as you, and then all the hours and drive time is connected with your account and created in the driver logs. And then when anyone else gets in to drive that vehicle, they're also going to have their own account, and then any drive time is going to be accumulated to them as well. One other thing, we've had some people asking for copies of the presentation. So we are recording this, and we will be providing you with a copy. We'll email that out afterwards. And here's another good question. We're running out of time, so I think this will be the last one. With that video, we're actually going to take all the questions that have been sent in here, and we're going to answer them, create a blog post so you can go through them all, because we don't have the time to get to all the questions that have came in. But this question's about rental vehicles and whether or not they're going to be exempt from the ELD. So right now, there are no exemptions for rental vehicles in the mandate. So this sort of could lead to two different situations as we see it. One, rental companies could probably start providing their own ELD, not their own, but providing an ELD system when companies rent a truck. Or companies are going to have an ELD system that's fairly simple to move between rental vehicles. BigRoad is great for that. As I said earlier, we're pretty much a plug-and-play system. So whatever truck you have, you just take the system and plug it in there, and then get on your way, and that'll be nice and simple. So actually, again, we've had a lot of questions about Canadian companies when they're going to have it again. We don't know for sure when the Canadian government's going to be issuing their own rules. So keep that in mind when we do know. We'll definitely be sending out press releases on the topic. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you found it informative. We will be sending out the emails to let you know when the recording is up and when our answers on the blog post are up. So thank you very much.